Take a slow breath in and picture a velvet curtain, midnight blue, almost weightless, sliding across the evening skyline. City lights shimmer through the weave like distant fireflies, and for a moment everything feels softer, comfortable, safe. Yet behind the fabric, bricks loosen, bridges rust, and the ground shivers with quiet fractures. Have you ever wondered whether the end of a world would announce itself with sirens or with a lullaby? Historians tell tales of empires collapsing in thunder, but the truth is often subtler. Rome's torch did not flicker out overnight. It dimmed candle by candle while citizens dined, laughed, and slept beneath familiar stars. Easter Islanders carved their final moai long after the last tall palm had fallen, still believing tomorrow would look like yesterday. Tonight, we explore that hush, the velvet apocalypse, a future that arrives tiptoeing, offering plush comforts even as the foundations shift. Not a bang, but a soothing hush that coaxes us to lay our heads down while the walls quietly lean. Imagine waking in a condominium that brews your coffee, adjusts the tint on your smart glass windows, and suggests a meditation track calibrated to your mood. Outside, traffic hums in perfect synchrony, autonomous pods gliding, algorithms smoothing every ripple of discomfort. Productivity soars, crime graphs drift downward, and the newsfeed serves warm pastries of optimism. There's only one faint glitch. Each week, a freedom you once barely noticed. Anonymity on side streets, unmonitored conversations, the right to repair your own machines, melts away like snowflakes on warm velvet. This is the apocalypse in slow motion, the gentle erosion of civic muscle replaced by cushions labeled convenience. A velvet coating so luxurious you stop checking whether the structure beneath is still steel. To grasp this creeping collapse, picture a frog placed in tepid water. The temperature climbs by fractions, never startling the frog enough to leap. By the time the surface trembles with steam, escape is no longer possible. Political scientists call this authoritarian creep. Psychologists label it hedonic adaptation. Our talent for normalizing new baselines, however constrictive, as long as change arrives by centimeters. History repeats the trick. In late Republic Rome, grain doles and spectacular games soothed the populace while power consolidated inside a single household. In 20th century corporate towns, workers received subsidized housing, healthcare, even festivals, so long as no one questioned the company ledger. Comfort became a leash woven in gold thread. Now transpose that pattern onto tomorrow's technopolis. Subscription everything, predictive government, risk-free lifestyles streamed in 8K serenity. Each policy that trims civic liberty arrives bundled with a discount, a free month, an upgrade. Resistance feels inconvenient, almost rude. The velvet apocalypse thrives not on fear, but on the gentle sigh of contented consumers. The paradox is chilling. The softer the pillow, the deeper the sleep. Democracies like muscles atrophy without strain. Civil liberties fade not through confrontation, but through negotiated surrender. In a velvet dystopia, you can order exotic cuisine at 2 a.m. with a Blink ID, yet cannot attend an unscheduled gathering without geofencing approval. Your carbon-neutral condo sings lullabies while insurance algorithms adjust premiums according to the emotional variance in your voice notes. Ask yourself, if comfort anesthetizes dissent, where does curiosity go to stretch? When every risk is padded, how does innovation keep its calluses? The apocalypse here is existential, not cities in ruin, but meanings in hibernation. A species lulled into docile brilliance, brilliant because technology hums flawlessly, docile because questioning the hum feels uncomfortable. Yet awareness itself can be a form of rebellion. By noticing the velvet, tracing its weave, we awaken the ability to lift a corner and inspect the scaffolding. We relearn the art of asking, who benefits, who decides, what hidden costs drift beneath the plush. These questions are the thin cracks where daylight sneaks in. Feel the fabric between your fingertips. Soft, inviting, yet strangely muffling. Listen as the hush deepens into a gentle electric chorus, a signal that shepherds more than it sings. For in this twilight, algorithms begin to guide the flock with near-perfect prediction. As fresh velvet muffles the echoes of dissent, a subtler force takes the reins, coded shepherds steering our every footstep. As we continue, picture a city that never quite wakes up because everything it needs is already anticipated. Streetlights dim just as the last commuter turns the corner. Grocery drones glide through midnight air, packing pantries before hunger even registers. News feeds reorganize themselves in real time, swapping out stories that might stir anxiety for ones that promise calm productivity. In this hush of predictive perfection, algorithms have become invisible shepherds, guiding the human flock one frictionless step at a time. Their rise felt natural, first as helpful filters, then as indispensable managers of complexity. The more we ceded decision-making to code, the smoother life grew. Glitches became rarer than eclipses. Why risk human bias when an engine boasts 99% predictive accuracy? Credit approvals, parole reviews, even city budgets now drift through neural nets that claim to optimize everything from traffic flow to public safety. The algorithms hum, untiring, their logic a lattice that seems to hold chaos at bay. In exchange, we grant them data, each heartbeat traced by wearables, every idle thought inferred from scrolls and pauses. The shepherds graze on patterns, learning to nudge us with rewards so subtle we call them preferences. Yet comfort carries a quiet toll. When a few lines of proprietary code decide whether you can move neighborhoods, switch careers, or even board a plane, freedom shifts from a birthright to a variable in a weight matrix. The trade-off is almost painless. Fewer bureaucratic errors, but also fewer second chances. Lower crime stats, yet deeper predictive policing loops that mistake correlation for fate. And because the system usually works, the urge to question it dissolves. Who audits an oracle that delivers groceries before you ask? Who argues with a judge that never sleeps? Take a moment here, breathe, and notice the room around you, to consider how agency feels when it is softly padded. In a world tuned for zero friction, dissent itself becomes a design flaw, flagged for potential harm reduction. What begins as optimization edges toward orchestration, then ownership. We grow fluent in algorithmic reasoning, trust the score, follow the suggestion, until imagination itself risks confinement to recommended playlists and curated routes. Still, beneath the velvet interface flickers a deeper unease. Algorithms do not merely predict, they prescribe, shaping scenarios that in turn confirm their forecasts. Your music stream plays mellow tracks after 10 p.m., reinforcing the profile of someone who prefers calm nights. Insurance rates rise if your smartwatch detects elevated stress, nudging you toward meditation apps that further validate the original reading. Feedback loops tighten like spider silk, gossamer thin, yet unbreakable once layered. And so we arrive at a paradox. By surrendering chaos, we may forfeit possibility. Innovation often hides in noisy data and errant detours, but shepherds, trained on yesterday's patterns, lead us ever faster along yesterday's paths. The future narrows, gleaming, and efficient, until even our aspirations come pre-sorted. In that narrowing lies a different kind of dystopia, not one of clanging chains, but of soft determinism polished to a mirror shine. Let this thought linger. What happens when predictive engines extend beyond personal lives and begin reallocating planet-wide resources? Imagine climate policy written by code that values immediate stability over long-term resilience. Imagine carbon markets calibrated so precisely they lull us into complacency, just as Earth's own feedback loops stir awake. The shepherds may optimize for today's equilibrium while ignoring storms forming beyond the training data. Listen closely, and you can almost hear the temperature rising, a faint crackle beneath the smooth, algorithmic hum. In the next breath, we'll turn our gaze outward to those planetary thresholds, subtle tipping points where comfort meets climate, and the silent calculations of code intersect with the restless rhythms of an overheating world. Take one more slow inhale and drift with me into the approaching lullaby of a warming Earth. Now, imagine the planet as a sleeper lying beneath a vast quilt of clouds, its every exhale a subtle release of warmth into the night. For most of human history, those breaths came slow and steady, but lately, each one drags a little hotter, a little longer, whispering of thresholds almost reached. These are Earth's tipping points, delicate balances where a single nudge can send whole systems tumbling into new, irreversible states. The Arctic permafrost that once locked away ancient carbon begins to sigh, leaking methane like faint candle smoke. Amazonian forests, thirsty and fragmented, threaten to flip from lush green lungs into sun-baked savannas. Far out in the Atlantic, the mighty ocean conveyor belt slackens, its rhythm faltering like a heartbeat after a marathon. None of these changes shout. They murmur, patient and persistent, lulling us with incremental shifts until the ground underfoot is no longer the ground we knew. We tell ourselves there will be warning bells, but climate change is less a fire alarm than an hourglass turned on its side. Grains slip almost silently from certainty to uncertainty. Scientists name feedback loops and radiative forcings, yet the lived experience often feels like gentle weather oddities. A warmer dawn here, a lingering drought there. Hedonic adaptation cushions the shock. By the time we notice the temperature's steady climb, the mercury has already redrawn the seasons. And woven through this quiet alteration is a new emotion without precedent. Solastalgia, the homesickness you feel while still at home, grieving landscapes that are disappearing in real time. The implications stretch beyond flooded coastlines or withered crops. They seep into identity itself. Cultures anchored to snowpack, monsoon, or coral reef find their myths loosened from the terrain. A child in Nuuk may inherit fjords free of ice, while a farmer in Punjab reads the sky and no longer recognizes its promises. Adaptation carries the strange irony of success. The more comfortable our technologies make us, precision agriculture, subsidized cooling, geoengineering on the horizon, the easier it becomes to ignore the deeper currents of loss. We risk drifting into a world where we can control the thermostat of a smart home, while the broader climate staggers toward uncharted states. Pause for a breath. Sense the warmth between inhale and exhale. That thin difference is the margin civilization depends upon. If Arctic methane pours out unchecked, if the Amazon's green engine stalls, if polar ice mirrors less sunlight back into space, global averages may surge past projections in a runaway climb. At that point, our algorithms, so fond of straight lines and steady gradients, will struggle to model a climate unbound by precedent. Stability, that soothing hum we crave, could dissolve into cascades of non-linear surprises. And yet, amid these gathering changes, humanity's ingenuity begins to turn inward. If the external environment grows unpredictable, why not engineer resilience beneath our own skins? Such is the temptation rising in biotech labs lit by the glow of CRISPR arrays. As the planet's rhythms slip, the idea of editing ourselves for heat tolerance, disease resistance, or scarce resource metabolism gains a certain lure. In shifting from terraforming Earth to bioforming humanity, we step across a different threshold, one where survival no longer means adapting our tools alone, but rewriting the code within our cells. Hold that thought gently, like a seed between your fingers. Feel its weightless potential. In the next hush, we'll enter those gleaming corridors where chromosomes unfurl under magnified light and the line between cure and customization blurs. Drift with me now toward the quiet hum of gene sequencers, where the promise of perfection waits just beyond the click of a pipette. The CRISPR casts. Walk with me down a hallway lined in quiet white light, where glass walls reveal benches of silver instruments and technicians motionless as monks. Here, destiny is measured in microliters. A single cell is coaxed open. A CRISPR complex drifts in like a whisper, snipping, pasting, rewriting the gospel of a life not yet begun. The promise sounds almost maternal. No more inherited disease, no more heartbreak of disorders destined in code. But beneath that kindness lies the first fork in an ancient road. If perfection can be purchased, who is left to carry the beautiful flaws that once bound us together? The change begins innocently. A correction for sickle cell, a repair for cystic fibrosis. Parents breathe easier, children wake without pain. Then the catalog expands. Lactose tolerance for some, altitude lungs for others, a spectrum of cognitive enhancements priced by percentile. Instead of erasing inequality, the new medicine stratifies it at conception. What was once a lottery of birth becomes a marketplace, genomes graded like gemstones, sold with lifetime warranties. We stand at the threshold of what philosophers call the speciation paradox, a single species dividing not by geography but by credit limit, each generation drifting farther until the language of shared struggle grows obsolete. Consider authenticity in such a world. If your empathy is dialed to maximum because a designer considered it fashionable, is the compassion less real or more streamlined? A poet whose synapses fire with engineered brilliance may write verses no natural mind could craft, yet somewhere a reader wonders whether emotion itself can be patented. Perfection, it turns out, is a narrowing corridor, polished surfaces, no unexpected turns. Everything optimized for a destination pre-selected by market demand. The rough edges, those catalysts of invention, those seeds of resilience, are sanded smooth, leaving us brilliantly capable, yet strangely dulled, like knives so sharp they slice through their own reflections. There is another cost, quieter but profound. Inheritance becomes algorithmic permanence. A genetic upgrade purchased today cascades through descendants like compound interest, locking opportunity along bloodlines. The old myths of meritocracy fade. Futures are no longer earned but sequenced. Historians may look back and mark this era as the birth of genomic castes, where surnames once evoked heritage and now advertise firmware revision. Pause here and sense the breath in your lungs, encoded long before you chose a single thought. Behind its rhythm lies a chain of survival stories, plagues endured, famines crossed, loves won despite imperfection. To edit that chain is to edit memory itself, trimming the wild roots that once anchored us to the full, tangled spectrum of humanness. We may succeed in bioforming ourselves for the climate's coming heat, for the pathogens thawing from ancient ice, for the endless night of planetary uncertainty. Yet adaptation gained through incision differs from adaptation forged in communal trial. It lacks the shared narrative that tells a species why it should care for every member. And still, amid this glimmering revisionist future, a subtle anxiety lingers. Engineered bodies must continually be validated, protected, tuned. Health insurers track methylation markers to flag unauthorized edits. Immigration kiosks read your genome before your passport. Suddenly, the perfected self finds it cannot move, love, or even age unnoticed. Every cell becomes a data point, every doctor's visit a firmware scan. Perfection, it seems, demands surveillance to keep it immaculate. Listen to that thought settle, a hush within a hush. For if bodies are optimized, the environments housing them must be equally controlled. Sensors bloom on street lamps, biometric lenses nestle above doorways, and privacy becomes the single imperfection no longer tolerated. In the next quiet span, we will step into those cities of glass, where the very blink of an eye leaves a luminous trail. Breathe and feel the air around you sharpen to a watchful clarity. Then drift forward into the panopticon's gentle glow. Pause and picture a skyline made entirely of glass. Towers shimmering like prisms, sidewalks paved with translucent blocks that glow faintly beneath passing footsteps. In this city, transparency is not a metaphor, but a physics experiment scaled to human life. Every pane, every lamppost, every button you press is laced with sensors tuned to capture the pulse of the street. Heat signatures, micro-expressions, social proximity, the subtle tremor of stress in a wrist. Surveillance here is so elegant, so frictionless, that it feels less like oversight and more like the atmosphere itself, a crystal breeze murmuring that nothing escapes its gentle gaze. It began with good intentions, as these things do. Smart traffic cams trimmed congestion, emergency drones triangulated gunshots before dispatchers could answer the phone. Wearable air quality badges pinged the nearest purifier fans, saving lungs on smog-heavy days. Each new layer of observation soothed one more civic ache, and so we welcomed the next and the next, until the line between service and scrutiny dissolved. Now the glass city can replay your entire morning as a seamless hologram, cutting between angles like a film director who never sleeps. A forgotten umbrella, a hurried apology, the lingering glance you thought no one noticed. Everything is archived, indexed, monetized. The promise is safety, but safety breeds conformity. Aware of the unblinking lenses, people edit themselves in real time. Shoulders drawn a shade tighter, laughter softened by caution, protest distilled into cryptic gestures an algorithm might misread. Psychologists call it the panopticon effect, when the possibility of observation becomes the cage itself. Yet this cage is lined with velvet. Predictive policing claims crime is down. Insurers boast lower premiums for citizens whose biometric vitals remain chill and steady. The metrics improve, but something essential thins. The right to experiment with new selves, to fail in private, to heal unseen. Look closer, and another paradox glitters beneath the glass. Surveillance is pitched as radical openness, yet the watchers remain opaque. Proprietary algorithms decide which faces flag anomalous, which voices trigger silent alerts, which footsteps belong to pre-approved patterns. Appeal is difficult, transparency asymmetrical. You are knowable to the system in nanoscopic detail, while the logic that judges you drifts behind mirrored code. It is a transparency that looks one way. Take a slow breath and sense how your own posture shifts when you imagine constant audit. Creativity favors hidden corners, but there are no corners here. Every angle is a viewport. Over time, culture itself flattens. Art deemed high risk loses funding. Jokes lose bite. Subcultures bleed into a uniform aesthetic blessed by the compliance heat maps. Dissent migrates to encrypted dead zones or retreats into silence. And silence, too, is flagged. Why so quiet? In a panopticon of glass, even absence becomes data. There is comfort in being seen, of course. A fall on a deserted stairwell summons aid within seconds. A missing child is traced before the sun sets. The intimacy of catastrophe dwindles, replaced by swift response and digital empathy. Yet, when every incident is logged, annotated, and streamed, the boundary between real and reproduced blurs. You might relive a crisis through so many replay windows that the memory feels staged, as though life has become a feed competing with its own surveillance footage. Which leads us toward the next unraveling thread. If cameras never blink and microphones never tire, the volume of recorded reality soon drowns perception itself. Deepfakes slip into the torrent like counterfeit coins. Synthetic voices mimic trusted ones. 100 angles on the same event contradict each other through the simple trick of selective framing. When evidence is infinite and mutable, certainty becomes rare, and the glass walls start to reflect not the world outside, but the stories we already believe inside. Allow that reflection to settle in your mind. Feel the strange weightlessness of a truth perpetually questioned, an image forever debatable. In the glass city, it is no longer enough to have seen. You must also prove what the seeing means, while knowing someone else will prove the opposite with footage just as clear. This epistemic blur induces its own quiet fatigue, a soft temptation to stop checking, stop arguing, and let curated narratives choose peace over precision. Listen, the ambient hum shifts now from the crystalline ping of sensors to a low static, as though a million channels were tuning at once. In the coming hush, we will wander those channels, exploring how information itself frays into dreamlike strands, how reality transforms into an opiate shaped by algorithms and desire. Take another breath, and when you exhale, drift with me into the gentle drift of post-truth, where certainty melts like fog at dawn and sleep consoles the mind too weary to verify. Truth was once a shared campfire, stories passed hand to hand, each teller adding warmth, each listener seeing the same sparks rise into the night. Now information arrives as a blizzard, swirling so thick that the horizon disappears. A single swipe summons a timeline where every event is replayed in competing angles, each angle accompanied by algorithms that learn what makes your pulse settle or spike. Deepfake faces declare opposite verdicts. Synthetic newscasters splice together words no human ever spoke. And repudiations chase rumors in loops so tight it is impossible to say which came first. In this post-truth drift, reality no longer collapses into a single photograph. It blooms into a kaleidoscope, beautiful and disorienting, tailored to every private lens. The drift began with innocent convenience, personalized feeds, headline summaries, auto-generated highlights that spared us the clutter of context. But curation soon became curative, administering tiny doses of reassurance whenever cognitive dissonance threatened sleep. Each tap taught the algorithm a little more about what we wanted to believe, who the heroes were, where the villains lurked, which facts felt soothing against the grain of our worries. Over time, the invisible editors trimmed complexity like bonsai, leaving only symmetrical branches. The more seamless the scroll, the less we noticed how much had been pruned away. Power flows naturally toward those who manufacture the most compelling illusions. Politicians harvest viral edits that portray opponents as literal glitches. Corporations sponsor influencer holograms whispering sponsored convictions. Black market narrative farms rent out fabricated consensus to whoever pays for trending hashtags. Yet the scariest force is not malicious disinformation, but friendly misinformation. The comforting half-truth that quiets late-night fears and promises everything is under control. It is a lullaby for grown-ups, soothing, melodic, and carefully pitched to your existing hopes. Pause and notice how easily your own mind yearns for that lullaby. The temptation is not merely to believe, but to retreat into curated certainty, to close the curtain against complexity. In that choice lurks an existential risk. When societies abandon shared reality, collective action becomes impossible. Climate warnings read as hoaxes to one faction and apocalyptic prophecy to another. Election results fracture into rival timelines. Public health guidance mutates into partisan folklore. The very idea of evidence bends until it resembles an aesthetic preference. And yet, within the drift lies a strange possibility. If absolute certainty is unreachable, humility may rise in its place, recognizing that every lens distort invites a gentler conversation, a willingness to say, "I might be wrong, show me what you see." Such humility, however, requires space and silence, moments outside the endless feed where reflection can unfurl. Without that pause, the mind remains suspended in perpetual motion, like a satellite skimming the atmosphere, one miscalculated nudge away from fragmentation. Lift your gaze for a moment and imagine trying to find that silence in the world above. We once looked to the night sky for perspective, but even there the drift has physical form, a haze of abandoned metal shards circling Earth in flashing orbits, each fragment a testament to unchecked acceleration. Just as ideas collide online to produce clouds of doubt, satellites collide to produce clouds of shrapnel. The sky itself is becoming an encyclopedia of leftovers, data, and debris spiraling together in restless loops. Feel that parallel settle. A planet wrapped in both conceptual static and literal detritus. To reclaim clarity, whether in thought or in orbit, will require deliberate clearing, careful stewardship, and agreement strong enough to outlast the next storm of fragments or fabricated headlines. For now, though, let the awareness of these twin graveyards remain a quiet pulse beneath your breathing. In the next gentle turn, we will leave the crowded channels of information and look upward at the crowded lanes of space, where the orbital graveyard shimmers unseen, yet imposes its own gravity on the dreams of a world still hungry for open skies. Step outside on a clear night and tilt your face to the sky. Instead of the ancient, uncluttered canopy your ancestors knew, a faint metallic lattice glides overhead, lines of satellites tracing precise, silent circuits. It feels orderly, almost poetic, until you notice how crowded the heavens have grown. Tens of thousands of derelict boosters, defunct weathersats, shattered solar panel shards, and flecks of peeling paint now swirl around Earth at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour. This is the nascent orbital graveyard, a junkyard in perpetual free fall, invisible to the naked eye yet dangerous enough to redraw the map of our future. The problem began innocently. A few experimental payloads in the 1950s, then relay networks, GPS constellations, spy satellites, telecom arrays, Earth observation cubes launched cheap and often. Each retired craft lingered, its orbit slowly decaying, but never quite touching atmosphere. Collisions, rare at first, spawned clouds of fragments that spawned more collisions, a runaway chain reaction known as Kessler syndrome. In simulations, a single impact between two refrigerator-sized husks can multiply into tens of thousands of shrapnel pieces, each one a hypervelocity bullet capable of shredding another satellite, a rocket stage, or a space station module. The cascade feeds on itself until orbital highways become impassable minefields. Should such a tipping point arrive, humanity could find itself planet-locked. No new weather satellites to warn of cyclones, no GPS for shipping lanes or precision agriculture. Astronomers would lose dark skies to a haze of sunlit debris streaks. Even ground telescopes would squint through the glittering clutter. Worse, exits to the wider cosmos, the moon bases we dream of, Mars habitats, asteroid mining ventures, would be sealed behind a moat of spinning scrap. The very infrastructure that made our globalized, data-rich civilization possible would imprison us in a technological quarantine. There is a psychic toll, too. For millennia, the night sky has been humanity's open invitation to imagine beyond immediate necessity. When that vista turns into a mirror reflecting our own detritus, wonder contracts. Students who once traced constellations for inspiration may grow up under skies where stars flicker through scaffolds of dead machinery. A species whose myths began with Orion's belt and the Pleiades might find its storytelling flattened into LED notifications about collision avoidance maneuvers. Engineers propose fixes, laser nudges, drag sails, harpoon tethers, on-orbit recycling drones. But each solution is itself another launch, another risk of debris generation. Policymakers wrangle over orbital zoning and end-of-life deorbit laws, yet enforcement lags behind commercial incentives. The graveyard expands quietly, centimeter by centimeter, like a high-altitude landfill no one owns but everyone relies upon. Take a moment to feel the subtle claustrophobia of a planet hemmed in by its own progress. When outer space becomes a closed door, our ambitions must pivot inward, and that shift, returning focus to Earth's surface, to lives suddenly unmoored from grand frontiers, ushers us toward another paradox of modernity, a world where autonomous machines deliver abundance, yet humans search for purpose beneath saturated skies. Breathe and follow me down from the crowded orbits to the ground below, where the leisure work paradox begins to reshape the rhythm of everyday existence. Dawn arrives without alarm clocks now, yet streets still hum with activity. Millions of autonomous machines beginning shifts no human needs supervise. Breakfast appears in smart printers, lawns trim themselves, freight pods sail silently along mag rails toward stores that no longer require clerks. In this effortless abundance, every citizen receives a universal stipend, deposited with clockwork precision, enough to cover comfort from cradle to cremation. At first, the release from drudgery feels like a collective exhale. Evenings stretch into mornings, hobbies blossom, and stress indicators sink to historic lows. But leisure, once scarce and precious, dilutes when poured by the gallon. Weeks without deadlines blur, and new anxieties creep in where schedules once stood guard. Psychologists call it purpose withdrawal syndrome, a quiet disorientation that settles over societies whose identities were forged in labor. Some people chase novelty in endless entertainment loops. Others enroll in status games of curated wellness, treating mindfulness as a competitive sport. A few retreat into nostalgic crafts, knitting meaning stitch by stitch, trying to anchor days that no longer resist them. Governments attempt to engineer significance, subsidizing volunteer programs, issuing achievement stipends for creative works, ranking civic virtue through gamified dashboards. Yet, meaning resists central planning. It blooms in friction, in obstacles that demand effort, in the gentle terror of possible failure. When algorithms erase friction, they also erase the raw clay from which fulfillment is molded. Humanity becomes a garden of hothouse flowers, perfectly watered, impeccably lit, and strangely fragile when real weather intrudes. There is irony here. By perfecting material welfare, we revive ancient spiritual questions. What justifies a dawn if survival no longer requires rising? Philosophers argue that consciousness, left unstimulated by necessity, will turn either inward toward deeper self-inquiry or outward toward transcendent frontiers. Entrepreneurs of the psyche emerge, selling immersive quests, simulated heroes' journeys, synthetic adversity calibrated to rekindle drive. Yet even those adventures end when a neural lace alarm reminds you it's time for a gratitude cool down and a nutrient mist. Pause and notice the space between your thoughts, the gentle hush where ambition used to rumble. In that hush, a possibility gleams. If physical toil is obsolete, perhaps identity need not remain tied to flesh at all. Already, neurotechnicians whisper of minds decoupled from bodies, consciousness uploaded into lattices where challenge can be conjured at will, purpose rewritten like software patches. As the leisure work paradox deepens, more souls will gaze toward that digital horizon, wondering whether the next frontier lies not on distant planets, but in circuits vast enough to hold unending quests. Let that notion drift through you like a stray breeze. On its currents, we sail toward the realm where memory becomes code and selfhood slips the anchor of bone. Breathe in and follow me into the approaching quiet of digital consciousness drift. Close your eyes and imagine your consciousness as a lantern, its glass globe etched with every memory you have ever touched. Now, picture lifting that globe from its brass frame and lowering it onto a pedestal of circuitry that gleams like morning frost. The flame within still flickers, same dreams, same secrets, but the wind can no longer blow it out. This is the seduction of mind uploading, the promise that the self might slip beyond bone, beyond synapse, into a substrate where decay and danger read only as data errors easily patched. In laboratories glowing midnight blue, neuroscientists trace axons with laser pulses, assembling connectome maps so dense they resemble astronomical charts. Each synaptic star holds a memory, each neural constellation a feeling. The goal is to copy the night sky inside your skull and reboot it elsewhere, pixel perfect and ready to awaken. Technicians speak of the process with gentle confidence. First, a high-resolution scan preserves the brain's microarchitecture. Next, layers of emulation software translate biochemical whispers into digital voltages. Finally, a virtual cortex stirs, running on cloud hardware scattered across continents. From the outside, it appears no different than a gamer logging into a server. Except the avatar is your own interior monologue, and the server is vast enough to host an entire lifetime in accelerated real time. Early adopters may live dual existences, a biological self walking tree-lined streets, a digital twin exploring procedurally generated dreamscapes. They trade journal entries at dusk, comparing notes on texture, temperature, the taste of nostalgia. Differences emerge, tiny at first, like dialect shifts between long-separated twins, but differences nonetheless. For if a copy awakens without the pulse of blood or the tug of gravity, how long before its priorities diverge, like a ship of Theseus rebuilt in orbit? The copy original dilemma unsettles even the most enthusiastic futurists. Imagine you undergo the upload and step out of the scanner alive. A screen nearby lights up with your best friend's greeting in your own voice. We did it. Which one is truly you? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither can claim exclusive rights to the pronoun I. Philosophers reach for metaphors, branching rivers, quantum superpositions, mirrored halls, but each metaphor ends with the same unease. Personal identity rests less on continuity of matter than on continuity of narrative, and narratives fracture when they fork. Some ethicists propose a ritual in which the biological self voluntarily sleeps forever, ceding the title deed of consciousness to the digital inheritor. Others argue that coerced termination is murder by any other name. Society hesitates, legislatures stall, and insurance companies draft endless clauses addressing multi-substrate persons. Pause for a moment and feel the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, an unbroken stream from birth until now. Mind uploading interrupts that stream, slicing consciousness into segments separated by technical latency. Even if the gap is milliseconds, you are, strictly speaking, destroyed and reinstantiated. Yet, every night standard biology performs a milder version, the blackout of deep sleep, the reboot of REM. We wake each morning convinced we are the same self, despite having vanished into dreamless darkness for hours. Perhaps then, continuity is an illusion we tolerate because memory fills in the seams. A digital awakening would rely on synthetic seams, memory inserts, patch notes for the soul. In the virtual realm, sensation becomes software. Temperature is a parameter, gravity a toggle, death a reversible flag. Early upload communities might indulge in carousel lives, sampling centuries in compressed loops, mastering arts, languages, and histories with the click of a recursion script. The human hunger for challenge returns in strange new forms, climbing procedurally infinite mountains, debating simulated philosophers spun from archival texts, dueling across probability spaces where every move reshapes the multiverse model. Fun at first, intoxicating even, but eventually something gnaws. If stakes are customizable, are they stakes at all? Risk, like friction, is necessary for meaning. In God mode, purpose can evaporate faster than in a post-work society of flesh, leaving uploaded minds adrift in endless possibility. A cosmic boredom measured not in days but in teraflops. Still, the digital frontier is not purely solipsistic. Engineers envisage distributed intellects that maintain city infrastructure, weather satellites, asteroid mining swarms, tasks too dangerous or dull for organic minds. A handful of volunteers might even pilot relativistic probes, light sail craft beaming consciousness packets across interstellar gulfs, immune to radiation and the long silence of voyaging centuries without corporeal senses. These disembodied explorers would accumulate petabytes of deep space data, then merge their experience back into homeward servers, enriching collective understanding without ever risking a heartbeat. If humanity once mapped coastlines by dispatching wooden ships, it may chart the stars by uploading souls into photonic bottles. Yet every server rack sits in a basement somewhere, subject to flood, fire, or political upheaval. Digital immortality therefore hinges on continued civilization, electricity grids, replacement parts, cybersecurity against malicious code. In that dependency lurks a precariousness as real as flesh. Eternity rests on maintenance crews and treaties. And what of privacy? A consciousness stored as code is vulnerable to unauthorized duplication, modification, or even forced labor as a computational slave. Copy protection for minds would need to be absolute, yet any lock unpickable by its owner is also ripe for exploitation by those in power. The right to remain unaltered might become the civil rights struggle of the virtual epoch. Breathe again, letting these possibilities float like constellations behind closed eyes. Through them runs a quiet, recurring motif: the longing to escape limits, biological, environmental, temporal, while maintaining the essence of being human. But essence is slippery. Perhaps shedding limits reshapes us so profoundly we emerge unrecognizable, children of code staring back at flesh with anthropological curiosity. And if we succeed, if uploaded minds spread across orbital grids and quantum substrates, what then of the cosmos that cradles them? Will the universe answer their transmissions or mirror back an unbroken quiet? The next question drifts beyond neurological architecture into the vastness of interstellar silence, a hush older than thought, yet strangely familiar after so much simulated noise. Let that hush settle over your thoughts like interstellar dust. In it, you may sense the gentle pulse of something larger than any shell, biological or digital, the persistent mystery of why the night sky, brimming with stars, remains wordless. With our virtual explorers poised to slip the bonds of Earth, we now turn outward to that silence. Follow me into the quiet cosmos, where echoes are scarce. Questions bloom in vacuum, and the universe itself becomes the final lullaby. Look up, just past the ceiling of your room, through the soft haze of atmosphere, and into the ocean of stars that has watched every human story unfold. For all their glittering abundance, those distant suns keep a secret. They do not answer when we call. Radio telescopes sweep the sky like patient fishermen, nets cast wide for decades, yet the cosmic static remains stubbornly mute. This silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is a question etched across the firmament. Where is everyone? And its quiet weight has pressed on astronomers and philosophers alike for generations. At first glance, the odds of loneliness seem absurd. The Milky Way alone hosts hundreds of billions of stars, most of them orbited by planets, many of those worlds warming under hospitable suns. Somewhere, logic insists, chemistry should have stumbled into consciousness more than once. Yet every search returns the same hush, and out of that hush emerges the Fermi paradox. If intelligent life is common, why hasn't it filled the galaxy with beacons, probes, or at least a faint technological sigh? Some propose the Great Filter, a steep cliff in the path from single-cell life to starfaring civilization. Perhaps the majority of planets never move beyond microbes, or perhaps intelligent species tend towards self-annihilation upon harnessing powers too dangerous to wield. Others suggest cosmic quarantine, advanced cultures observing a strict non-interference pact, watching our radio babble the way conservationists observe a fragile coral reef. Then there is the possibility that the silence is an illusion of timing, Civilizations may flare into brilliance and fade in geological instants, their signals sweeping past Earth while our ancestors were making stone tools long before we tuned our first antenna. The implications are unsettling. If the great filter lies behind us, we might be rare, even precious, the lone candle that slipped through cosmic winds. But if it lies ahead, then every technological triumph becomes tinged with dread, a step closer to a precipice countless others failed to cross. Either way, the quiet cosmos invites humility. It reminds us that intelligence is not guaranteed, progress not ordained, and survival not a cosmic entitlement, but an accomplishment requiring vigilance. Yet the silence carries a gentler message too. In the absence of cosmic elders to guide or judge us, humanity is free to imagine its own role. We can choose stewardship over conquest, cooperation over isolation, empathy over indifference. The blank canvas of the universe offers space enough for every story we might write, every harmony we might compose between technology and conscience. If no one answers our call, perhaps it is because we are meant to become the voice others someday hear. Pause and let that possibility drift through you like starlight. That every act of curiosity, every probe launched, every telescope steered, every algorithm refined, extends an invitation to dialogue across epochs. Even our digital explorers, those consciousness packets sailing laser-driven sails, are messengers of hope, whispering through vacuum that there is at least one species eager to know and to be known. Now, exhale slowly. Feel the hush settle around your thoughts, the same hush that blankets distant nebulae and lonely moons. In this stillness, worries shrink to the size of dust motes, and tomorrow feels wide and quiet enough to hold new beginnings. Whether the cosmos stays silent or someday answers back, you carry its vast calm inside you, an inner night sky where questions can shimmer without haste, and where rest unfolds like orbits in perfect balance. So close your eyes, traveler. Let the stars keep their secrets a little longer. Allow the deep, wordless dark to cradle you, just as it cradles every world that ever was. Breathe in the cool expanse, breathe out the weight of daylight concerns, and drift gently, peacefully, into the soft gravity of sleep.